People find comfort in the fact that education has always been here. I think the main purpose of a school, in my opinion, is not to just teach students. It's to allow them, it's to provide them with opportunities. I do not think that they will actually survive. The danger of that is, will AI be producing another version of a textbook that somebody has actually really thought about, gone through, decided this is what I want the kids to know and why? Or will it just be creating content for the kids without that pause and think?
Hello and welcome to our first podcast episode of Decoding Life in this academic year. We took a really long break for the past year, but we're back with our new principal, Mr. Jan. We're really honored to have him as our guest. And just an introduction, Decoding Life is a podcast aimed to teenagers who are kind of lost in life, and it can kind of help as like a compass towards what path you want to head to, because not everyone's path is the same, and that's what makes it so difficult. So today we have Mr. Jan, our new principal. Hello, and thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, it's fantastic to be here, and I do love the medium of a podcast, so this is really exciting.
So could you please tell us about yourself, who you are, your background, interests?
Yeah, of course. So, as you mentioned, I'm the new principal here at Raha International School Gardens campus, but I'm not new to the UAE. I've been here for 2 years, and prior to that, I have been a school leader, and then prior to that, a teacher for the past over 25 years in 7 different countries in the world. And,
wow.
And I started as an English as an additional language teacher. That's my background, it's my training. And it was a great way to get into international education, because you get to, every class is a class of, let's say, 14 students from 14 different nationalities, 14 different languages, and that's just something that I've always enjoyed. So now I'm here.
That's a really long journey, and it's like quite interesting to see, and I also agree with you. Having studied in a school that's international, I have that first-hand experience of meeting 14 different students in 14 different nationalities, and it really opens your mind to different perspectives. And I think we've touched on your journey, but why do you teach? What do you like about teaching and leading a school?
That's a great question. I think what I like about leading a school is the fact that it's never the same job. You know, every day is slightly different. That's number one. Because you're working with so many different students, so many different parents, so many different staff. And again, that diversity sort of translates into what you do on a daily basis. That's one thing. The other thing that I really like about leadership is the fact that it's not only about being in the classroom, which is of course the most important thing for a school, but it's also seeing the school from a much bigger perspective. So when you are a teacher, you are obviously working with your students in the classroom, and again, that's absolutely amazing, and you know, it's wonderful that teachers can do that on a daily basis. What I like now is the fact that I get to see the school from how it works through the operations team, you know, how do the finances work, talking to the HR team, talking to the marketing team, you know, thinking about sort of translating what teachers do in a classroom. How does that translate to a marketing manager, you know, somebody who wants to speak and write and produce about the school in social media and so on. And it's just something that I really enjoy, you know, that diversity again and that versatility of the job. And in teaching, I do think that teaching is a super important profession. You know, I know we'll talk about AI and, you know, we'll talk about the future, but teaching is, and I still believe that it will continue to be, a human profession, because at the end of the day, teaching prepares student for life. Okay, it's not about the content. It's not about just, you know, higher level physics. It's about how do you then take those skills and actually work with others? How do you use your skills to either get a job or to get a new job or to, you know, speak with somebody? So, and I think teaching is something that really helps the students develop those skills. And so that's something I've always enjoyed about teaching, that human element of it.
So do you think that school is more than just content? Is it like personal growth as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the main purpose of a school, in my opinion, is not to just teach students. It's to allow them, it's to provide them with opportunities inside and outside of a classroom, and sometimes outside of the campus, to just learn more about themselves, learn more about others, and learn more about life. It's like I always give the example of when I worked in Singapore. My first year, we didn't have a design design center like we have here. It was taught out of a classroom. Okay, and the teachers did a great job, of course, but the second or third year, we opened this amazing design center with everything from, your laser cutters to plastic melters and, machines to create jewelry and so on. And then all of a sudden, students that had been sort of lost before, nobody really knew about them, they came alive and they were presenting to other students and teaching parents how to use the technology and so on. So that was an opportunity that if we didn't have that space, they wouldn't have possibly discovered that passion.
So it's more of like a place of exploration, which is how it links to personal growth and academic growth and kind of finding yourself. I think I can see how that ties into my own school journey, because in Raha, we're very fortunate to have a lot of facilities and a lot of really good teachers, so I'm able to find my interests. Do you think that was the case when you were in school? Has that changed, and will it change?
No, so that wasn't the case when I was in school. And I think that's an important point. Again, it doesn't mean that, I didn't learn things. It doesn't mean that I didn't grow up the right way. But school, when I was in school, didn't really provide us with opportunities. It wasn't the main purpose. The main purpose back then was to really sort of put everybody through a system.
Yeah.
Right? And it was a public schooling system, which there is an element of basically each country sort of, impairing putting a bit of an imprint on the students, right? You, for example, have to study history in a certain way if you study it in a national system, of course, because the history is always written, by the people who write the textbooks and so on. So it really wasn't, back then, it wasn't even thought about in terms of how can I give this student an opportunity to discover something outside of, about the outside world through after-school activities and so on. We did have those, but it was mostly through, for example, clubs. So in a way, I think, here we have a very, very rich extracurricular program. And that's amazing, because without having to already go to clubs outside of school, you can stay here and you go, you know what, this looks like fun. And you sign up for that, and it is possible that one impulse, that one teacher, the one person who's leading the club, or one peer will change your life. Because all of a sudden you could be signing up for stop motion, and you realize, I really like photography and cinematography. It's all of a sudden you may pursue it for life. You may not, but you never know.
Yeah, you never know. And I think that's one of the good things about exploration, because you don't know what you don't know, and then when you go through that and you go through that experience, you find out what you like. And I think there's a good side and a bad side to that, from my experience at least. But do you think this kind of system, how do you think the education will look like in like maybe 5 to 10 years? It's a hard question.
It is a hard question. I think about that a lot, and I genuinely haven't been able to come up with a good answer, because part of me wants to say, okay, we live now, over the past year and a half, everybody's lives have already changed through AI, okay?
Yeah.
It is so, at least obviously in this country and in most, countries with access to technology, it is so ubiquitous now that, people will, the whole Google search engine has already changed, right? The first thing you get now is the AI insight, right? Which is basically AI trying to guess, based on 3-4 words that you put in the search bar, what is it that you're looking for. So part of me wants to say, okay, if we've seen that sort of change over a year and a half, where will education take us in the future, right? So the one extreme opinion would be, yep, there'll be no teachers, in 5 to 10 years, everything will be AI generated. We'll all be sitting in front of computers, or not even computers, it'll be through devices and so on, and we'll all be interacting and learning. That's one extreme. The other extreme is nothing will change, okay, which is unlikely. That's pretty much impossible. So I do feel that, probably what will happen is somewhere a little bit in the middle. Education as such, which is really interesting, it's resistant to change. Education, we keep talking about AI nowadays for last year and a half, but people have been pushing for education reforms for decades now, more than decades. And frankly, sort of the cynic in me says very little has taken place. I mean, some things changed, but not at a sweeping scale. And that's because people find comfort in the fact that education has always been here. It's a little bit like if I describe a completely sort of a new radical classroom to your parents, and I'll say, will they send her to this class? They may go, yeah, it sounds interesting, but we want her to go into a good university, which means probably not. So people find comfort in something that hasn't changed, and education is one of these anchors. People love the fact that actually, most schools would have a library, most schools would have this, most schools would have that. It's the same. It gives them comfort. So, that means that I don't think that schools will completely radically change and be replaced by AIs. But I do think that a lot of what we teach will then be driven by AI-generated content. The fact that textbooks, whether printed or digital forms, I do not think that they will actually survive. I do think that content is much better presented in a much more dynamic and on-demand way, and I think that AI can produce that. The danger of that is, will AI be producing another version of a textbook that somebody has actually really thought about, gone through, decided this is what I want the kids to know and why? Or will it just be creating content for the kids without that pause and think? There's a huge question around ethical implication of AI. Who decides what for the AI, what is right, what is wrong to say? You know what I mean? And I think that would be interesting. Yeah, that would be interesting nut to crack.
I think especially because in school we learn a lot of subjects like history, geography, and with theory of knowledge, and especially the IB, we're kind of taught how we can question these things. Even AI or not, without AI in the picture, we still have these questions of who's writing this and what bias and perceptions do they have. And now with AI, it's a whole new level of how do we know what's truth and how do we know what to believe.
Absolutely. Look, it's, you touched on AI. You touched on TOK. I used to teach TOK as well, and it's one of my passions because of that. Because it teaches students at this age to actually really genuinely think critically, but not on a theoretical level, not philosophizing about life, but about what they're surrounded with. And 10 years ago, 15 years ago or so, when really sort of social media, not only, they started a long time ago, but when they really sort of started taking over the content creation, we were talking with students about, the echo chamber and, the filter bubble that they are in. And I think with AI, that will be something to consider even more.
Yeah, I think, and we're also adapting, as you said, teaching is a very human job, because although AI can give us the content, I think part of teaching is about, as you said, inspiring students and really, because it's the future of our world, essentially. The entire next generation, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, we're all learning, we're all going through the same school system, which probably won't radically change, as you've also mentioned. And I think it's quite interesting to see what's going to happen. But I think there's a big question of why bother? That's like why, because we're at a crossroad where we're not at the stage where we're kind of, it's content and everyone has to learn the same thing and does the same thing. But we're also not at the point where everything's adapted to everyone's individual path. So how do we make the most out of what we have now in school?
I would say, first of all, we're lucky here because we have the IB.
Yeah.
And the IB, across all of the programs, but more so in DP, already gives you that flexibility, right? It gives you the option to actually choose your subjects, but more importantly, to still see how they're all woven together through, for example, TOK and through, you know, other tools as well. So I think how you make the best of what you have right now is you look beyond, well, you choose the subjects wisely, but then you look beyond the subjects. And you say, okay, so I've selected these subjects because I sort of have a general idea that I want to go maybe in this direction in life. Not everybody knows that they want to be a doctor, you know, at the age of 16, 17. But you go, yeah, I sort of more like humanities maybe, you know, I like logical thinking, so I'm going to go into sort of this path. So when you choose your subjects, don't just think of them as subjects as such, but think about them in terms of what do all of these subjects teach me in terms of skills that I can then build on. So whether you take psychology or history, whether you take both of them, they will both teach you the content, yes, of course, but they will teach you a set of skills. And recognizing, actually, in both of these, I can use this particular skill to get to this level of thinking and then use it to, for example, get a job or to, you know, as I said, you know, meet people and have a conversation. I think that's the important thing. So I think there's a lot that we offer already in schools. I don't think it's, you know, it's a problem.
Of course, yeah. I think I'm kind of thinking about, as you're talking to me, I'm putting the pieces together and kind of thinking about my own education. And it's changing a lot, which is why I think sometimes we feel overwhelmed as students with the amount of expectations we have. For example, we have to learn the content. For example, if I take math, for example, it's a subject that's very like content heavy, but it does teach you critical thinking skills, logical thinking skills. And many people don't see the value in learning math now, because you have calculators, you have ChatGPT, which will just solve the question. But I think it's more about the skills that you learn, being able to...
It's about the application, sorry to interrupt. It's about the application of the skills, right? I'm a real believer, if you don't see the purpose, then why bother learning it? But if you see the application, yes, ChatGPT can solve this mathematical problem, but how will you then apply it? Why are you solving it in the first place?
Oh, that's something I never thought about. It's like the first time I'm hearing this perspective, because I'm always hearing it's about the skills, it's about like logical thinking skills, you're developing your brain. But I never thought about the purpose, the application, which is the purpose. And do you think that this would be useful in industry when you go into jobs? Like, will this be replaced by AI?
Yeah, sorry, which part?
Sorry, so just to clarify, so we have like AI, which can obviously solve these questions. So that's going to be automated in the future, because when we're looking at careers, and we're looking at actually using this. But where does the human aspect come into it when we use it in real life?
I don't know. I think, so, you know, part of me wants to say, at the moment where we are with AI, is there is still the need for human input, right? The output from AI will only be as good as what you put in. So think about it from the prompt writing exercise, right? The prompts. If you don't write the prompt the right way, AI will still produce an impressive, whatever it is, right? Article, picture, it will do it. It will never say, what do you mean at this point? It'll just go, yep, you asked me a question, here's the answer. But it may be a completely silly answer. Maybe something you really don't want. So it goes back to the input. How clear were you about what you wanted to do, right? And then, of course, how, again, critically thinking are you to be able to say at the end, actually, you know, I cannot submit this, I cannot use this. This is not what I was asking for. I think the question that I genuinely don't know the answer to, because I don't have the level of technical skills, is surely that will, over time, as AI develops, be solved as well, right? So in other words, if everybody uses AI long enough, you won't need to be very specific with the prompts, because the AI will already know you, right? It's a little bit like if you search for things online, you will pretty soon start being fed content that you know
that you already watch already,
exactly.
so it
the
knows
internet
you have
knows that you're interested in. Surely, you know, that's the same with AI. So I genuinely don't know, and I am a little bit. Well, actually, I am concerned about it, because I think what's saving us at the moment is that there is still that human input needed. There is still the ethical conversation which is still going through in terms of what am I asking for, and what do I do with the output. I mean, as a student, for example, sure, you can now say, write an extended essay for me, and it can do it, in a snap. But what are you really learning from it? Is it ethical for you to submit it? Clearly not. That's plagiarism, or it's whatever. It's just not, academic malpractice. But again, more importantly, what are you learning? What have you learned about yourself? What I always say about the extended essay, for example, it's an extension from the personal project, and that's an extension of the PYP exhibition, right? In an age-appropriate way, you are put in a situation where you have to choose an area that you're interested in, learn about it, do something about it, find out more about it, but more importantly, what have you learned about yourself? If you choose the wrong area to research when you're 10, 11, or 11, 12 for exhibition, and you do the same when you have to write 1,500 words for a personal project, and you do the same, you choose the wrong topic again when you write 4,000 words, you're going to be stuck with that topic for a long time. So really, what have you learned about yourself? Maybe you want to sort of focus more on the idea generating and topic selection phase of that process. Maybe that's where you need to be focusing on. If you just go through AI, it's not going to teach you that. And then in life, when you are selecting other things, it can be a job, it can be whatever, if you haven't had the practice of that part of the process, then you're likely to make mistakes then. So in a way, I do see all of these elements, and school, going back to where we started, as just experiential learning. You're basically just practicing for what may come later in life. And if you fast track it through AI or other tools, sure, you can get to the outcome a lot faster. But again, what have you learned?
So where do you draw the line okay, first of all, should we use AI in school, and to what point? Where do you draw the line and where you say no?
Right. AI is an amazing tool, so of course we should use it. We should use it, just like it'd be silly to say, well, we shouldn't be using the internet, or we shouldn't be using. No, of course, it is an amazing tool. But I think that the line for me, still at the moment, lies with working with students and understanding the quality of the input. Okay, so the what goes in. Actually, there's probably a step before, which is when is the appropriate time to use it or not, right? When.
Absolutely.
So deciding, is this the right tool for the job? So that comes first, I think. Then the input, right? And then critically evaluating the output and saying, what is it here that I can use? It's a little bit like if you go online and you do your research, articles pop up. If you just start indiscriminately copying and pasting into your work, that's going to be either plagiarism or you've quoted something without really rationalizing, without really saying why. The minute you go, oh, this is interesting, I will use it, I will cite it, and I will develop it with my own thoughts, that's when it's totally appropriate. And with AI, I think it's the same thing. I was listening to a podcast, I think it was the Freakonomics Radio, which is an amazing podcast. And this is actually over a year ago, they were talking about AI. And one of the great examples was given, somebody wanted to start a business. But they knew that they wanted to start the business, but they sort of didn't know where to begin. And they said, hey, can you generate some business ideas? This is where I live. This is sort of what shops are around me and so on. Can you just generate ideas? And of course it goes, yep. And it just generated an amazing list, everything from like selling postage stamps to whatever. But immediately, as a human being, you go, wow, I have something to work with now. That generation of ideas step, which may have taken me a long time, and maybe I'm just not that creative, was done for me, and I can then start working through it. So that was a great example. So I think, for example, it's totally acceptable to use it to generate ideas. But then again, how do you involve yourself with those ideas to say, okay, that's all good, but what is it here that's really for me? And why do I know that? And I don't think at this moment AI can do that for you.
I think one more thing I realize is we also, as humans, we filter out. When we ask AI for a list, or we ask AI for any response, we as humans know what we're looking for.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you put an input, you have an idea of what your output should be. So, for example, with a business idea, you can see as a human what you would purchase, and you know your situation, you have
Mm-hmm.
that experience, that judgment,
Mm-hmm.
and that's why you can filter out options and you can pick what would be
Mm-hmm.
most successful as a business,
Mm-hmm.
which AI can't do right now.
Exactly. And absolutely. And it can give you the facts. So it can say, all right, in Abu Dhabi, in Khalifa City, I'm recommending this because there's no other, let's say, shop, if you're thinking about a shop. There's no other shop of this, of what you're looking for. Therefore, it's a good business idea, right? But your input is, yeah, but you're asking me to sell postage stamps. And I really don't, I don't care about it at all.
Yeah.
AI at that moment wouldn't really know it. At the moment, again, the future, I don't know. If you keep engaging it on a daily basis for absolutely everything, I think at that point it will know that you don't like postage stamps. I don't know why I'm talking about postage stamp, but it sounds like a good idea.
Yeah. It's like the first thing that came to your mind, I think.
Yeah.
I can see how this is kind of playing together, and I think even if we have AI, which is like, it knows what you want, I think it's the aspect of your interests, but also what you know would work. Because sometimes what I'm interested in is not necessarily what would be a good business
Yeah.
idea or not.
Think about it as an extension of, again, what we already know is well established. Your online research, right, is tracked, and you are only fed suggestions and content that is related to your interest, just like your Netflix account and your Disney Plus account. All of a sudden, imagine of all of the shows and all of the films, if you're talking about Netflix and so on, that you're never even presented. They don't come up. They may be on page 215. You're never going to get there. That is very simplistic of what's happening obviously online. You have in a way put yourself into, and then it's being reinforced and reinforced and reinforced and reinforced. It's like looking for the next holiday. If you've been going and searching these places, that's what you will keep getting. But again, who makes the decision to really challenge and say, you know what, I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I've never been to this country, it scares me for whatever reason, but I'm going to do it anyway. That's that risk.
I think already there's psychology concept, I believe it's called confirmation bias,
Mm-hmm.
where if you already have some bias or already have some belief, and then you see more and more examples of that belief being reinforced, you tend to ignore everything else that opposes that. And I think with AI, because it's feeding you one specific certain content, it's filtering
Yeah.
out content based on what it thinks you would like to hear.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's bringing it to a new level and making it harder to get
Yeah.
out of that confirmation bias.
I think you're absolutely right. And as you're speaking, I'm sort of realizing, which I'm sure most tech people would know already. Really, when that AI learns how humans really behave, then it'll be very easy for it to control our lives through confirmation bias, through the filter bubbles, through the echo chambers and so on. It'll be very simple, but at the moment it is still learning that by interacting. So every single time you interact with it, it learns something about you. And the
Yeah.
more that we have developed that ecosystem, I think, the question is what's going to happen next.
Yeah, we have a really long way to go, and I think we've also come a really long way, like compared to when you were probably in school, which I don't know how long that was, but whatever it is, like the past 10 years itself, when I was starting school, the education system in itself was quite different,
Okay.
and now it's quite different. The world is really
Where
different.
did you start your schooling?
I started actually in a British school. I
Okay.
was 3, so about 13 years ago, which is not
So
that
how
long.
has it changed?
I mean, we didn't have AI to begin with.
Okay, yeah.
I think most social media was there, but like the current social media, like Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, these things weren't as big.
Mm-hmm.
We weren't so reliant on technology as we are now.
Yeah.
I think that's a good thing and a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I think
Something about that, I sort of realized because I'm not a heavy social media user at all, right? And I always thought about communicating, or there's formal ways of communicating, you know, like I grew up with newspapers and the TV and the radio basically announcing the news or telling me the news, right? And I realized that world is obviously, you know, long gone, but it is when governments and presidents and schools really communicate formally through Twitter or through Instagram that you realize it's not just social media, right? It is now the new way to get information out. So that has changed completely, right? So the minute you don't put something in the newspaper or you know, even online on a website, but you just tweet about it, that becomes now the news, the policy.
Yeah, this is like a really deep conversation, and we have like there's so many different ways you can look at it and so many different things you can link. And I think it does change, like when I was like, I'm still young, but when I was younger,
You are young.
when I was younger, I had like different aspirations, different ideas, different visions for the future. Like in the 1980s, I think we thought that at this point in time we'd have like flying cars.
Yeah.
We're still working on self-driving cars, forget about flying cars.
Yeah.
And I think that does, so it also emphasizes how you don't, like every decision you make now doesn't necessarily dictate what will happen in the future. So there's so much stress as students on like what subject do I pick and what will that lead to in a career, but you never can really predict it because the future is unpredictable.
That is very true.
And there's this quote that I have on my wall in front of my desk, and it's the best way to predict the future is to create it. So you never know what will happen in the future, but the thing you can control right now is what you do now, and that's
Absolutely.
what creates the future.
Absolutely. That's very
So
deep.
I think this brings us to, on the topic of childhood jobs, I wanted to do like, we have a new game that we do every podcast. With each guest, we will have a 2-minute career ladder show kind of, except it's with childhood careers, like your dream job as a child. So do you have one in mind?
Okay, so I had one in mind, but you already know it. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to improvise here, and I'm going to go, it's actually a job that my parents wanted me to have.
Oh, okay.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Can we do that?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fine. I'm just going to quickly start a 2-minute timer.
Okay.
Let me just put it on. Hopefully I'll get it. This is my first time doing it, so I'm kind of nervous. Okay. 3, 2, 1, start. So, is this similar to what you wanted to do as a child?
No.
Not at all.
No.
Is it a more traditional job?
Yes.
Doctor.
No.
At what age do they start like wanting you to do this?
I think maybe around the age of 15, 16.
Is it more STEM based?
No.
Is it a creative job?
No. Yeah, it depends. No, I'm going to say traditionally no.
Do you work in an office? Like
yes.
9 to 5?
Yes, you can.
Does it have anything to do with people? Do you interact with people?
Yes.
I'm thinking law right now. Is it something related to law?
Yes.
That's actually pretty good. A lawyer?
Yeah.
Okay. That was 1 minute.
Look at that.
That
1 minute.
good.
Actually 57 seconds to be precise. Well done. But what's
you.
interesting is on the creativity side of things, right? You would say, okay, a lawyer, there's no creativity because you have to interpret the law, you have to interpret the rules and so on.
Yeah.
But I think the creativity comes in, okay, but how do you, for example, present your case? You know, how do you work within a very confined space of, you know, the legal document, but then still represent your case in a different way? So I think there are a lot of creative options, you know, in any single job, and I think this is a great example of how a traditional job that typically would be seen as, you know, you're just sort of interpreting, can actually be very creative.
Especially now when you have so many laws and so many different considerations and all of this. And I think, again, AI will definitely help us to interpret it. I think this was relatively easy for me because my family is in law. Like,
really?
Like my uncles and my grandfather has a PhD in law and all that. So maybe that was why.
Okay, well, you did well.
Thank you. And I think that pretty much wraps it up. This was a really good discussion. It was really deep, and I definitely have a completely new perspective now. And honestly, these conversations and these podcasts, they also motivate me to do better because I meet all these people and know all these things, and it makes me feel more confident in myself that I can just stick with my interests and kind of move forward.
Yeah, well, look, thank you very much for having me. Definitely
so
stick with
much.
your interest
Yeah.
and keep, steering these conversations because, not only you, but I also learned something new. So thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. We're really honored to have you as our guest. If anyone from the audience has any opinions or any feedback or anyone you want to see next, please let us know. I know Coach Jez is a popular choice after Mr. Yan. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.